Velvel, tell me when to go. Okay, good evening. Thanks. The Hebrew calendar is more than just a calendar. If you study it well, you find many fascinating dimensions to it. And of course, it's all based on one particular principle, what is the nature of time? So before Einstein, time was actually seen by some thinkers as an invisible and man-made measurement for us to simply keep track between Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and between 1 hour and the next. It was Einstein that posited, there were some before him, but he made it popular and became proven science, that time is energy. And just as space is a very real entity, so is time. And those two interact with each other, to the point that he also demonstrated relativity in time, and the flow of time that has real implications in how we measure and understand the cosmos. Now, whether it was because he had a Jewish genes or not remains to be proven one way or the other, just as Freud, as how much he was influenced by his Jewishness, or for that matter Marx and some of the others. But one thing is undeniable, that long before Einstein is in the mystical tradition, the classic work of the Zohar, which is the classic mystical Jewish mysticism. Even though the word Jewish and mysticism seems to be actually somewhat of a contradiction of terms. Mysticism is a universal system. So there really isn't a thing called Jewish mysticism. Either it's universal mysticism or it's not. So the Zohar asks a question on a phrase in the book of Genesis, the Bible, where it says, Sheishis Yomim, 6 days, Asa Hashem es hashamayim v'saaretz. 6 days God created heaven and earth. Now there's a missing word in that sentence. It should have said the word in Hebrew, b'sheishas. In Hebrew, b'sheishas means in 6 days, or during the period of 6 days. During the span of 6 days, heaven and earth were created. And the Zohar begins and says 6 days heaven and earth were created, missing that preposition, the in. And the Zohar answers, because kol yema v'yema ovid avidite, which means in Aramaic and translated into English, that every day has its own energy. And the verse is actually exact, because besides of what was created during that period of time, time itself is a structure, is energy that was put into place. And therefore, Sheishis Yomim, that itself is the creation, is the structure. And the Kabbalists, which really elaborate on the Talmud, explain how each day has its own song. There's the Shir Shel Yom, the daily prayers in the morning. At the end of the prayer service, we say the song of the day. These were the songs sung and composed each day in the temple. And there's the Shir Shel Yom Echad, the first day, Sunday, and Yom Sheni, the second day, Monday, all the way through Shabbos, 7 days of the week. And we repeat that same song every Sunday. We repeat the song of Sunday. So the question is asked, what really repeats itself? The Baal HaTanya, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, puts it this way. Since the beginning of time, there have been thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, millions of days. So why do we count and begin the count every week of 7? We count 7 days and another, and we begin again, beginning of a week. Now, in basic culture, many people say the 7 days of the week is completely, as I said earlier, imaginary. Nothing happens at the end of 7 days. As a matter of fact, interesting, when they established the metric system, as the Europeans like to remind Americans that we have everything imperfect, the metric system is meant to be perfect. Everything is in tens. 10, 100, 1,000. Whereas there's 12 inches in a foot and 3 feet in a yard. It's all complicated. Nothing is symmetrical. Nothing is even. So when they established the metric system, they also wanted to establish there should be, instead of 7 days of a week, 10 days of the week. That was the only thing that was not accepted universally by anyone. The practical reason was because nobody could wait 10 days for a weekend. It's bad enough as it is. Scientists thought that if it would be a 10-day week, the suicide rate would go up. So they kept it to 7 days, and they're still trying to, whether it's a 4-day work week or 3-day work week. But the question is, what really is the reason that we count 7 days? So as I said, on a social level, there's nothing particular except maybe the psychology of human beings. That's the tolerance level that we can tolerate, called a week. But the Kabbalah and Hasidic thought puts it this way. It's really quite eloquent if you think about it, very poetic, that 7 is a cycle. And that time is energy, but there's something more than it. It's not just energy, it's a flow of energy that does not run like a river of time, as the expression goes, but it runs like a spiral, cycle. And that cycle concludes every 7th day. In other words, the days actually are really just a result of an energy flow. Every 24 hours, this energy flow changes. And the words of the mystics, that Sunday is the energy of love, chesed, light. And Monday is the energy of gvura, discipline. And Tuesday is the energy of compassion. And Wednesday is the energy of endurance, ambition, netzach. And Thursday is the energy of humility, hoid. And Friday is the energy of bonding, yesod. And Shabbos is the energy of malchus, dignity, majesty. So think of it that way. Instead of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, think of these as attributes, personality types. Each one directly impacting us, because then we have a Sunday within us, and a Monday within us, and a Tuesday within us. And this is so much part of the whole way the mystics in general look at the universe. And this isn't just Jewish mysticism. One of the unique things in Far Eastern thought is that it's really all an integral unity. It's not pieces. So when you think of it, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Sunday has nothing to do with Monday, except if you're preparing Sunday for a report on Monday. But if time is that type of energy, and time is, each day has its own particular personality, then we become one with time, and the same with space. And it just creates a symbiotic relationship of all of existence. When we talk about time, space, and man, or time, space, and soul, or in the words of the original Kabbalists, Olam Shana Nefesh, which is space, time, and soul. That triad, the triangle of the human being interacting with time and space, which is really essence of all our entire existence. So the mystics understand time in that fashion as a flow of energy that flows like a spiral. Which is why your birthday is so significant. It's not just a day that commemorates something that happened years ago when you were born. It's a recreation of the energy that existed then and that entered this universe when you were born, repeats itself on a different plane exactly as it was the first time. And this is the reason the holidays and so on. So as a short introduction, this is why today, actually last night and today, is a special day in the Jewish calendar. And when we look at it that way, you'll see the calendar actually illuminates very much our own psyches. It's a mirror image. And that's why in Jewish tradition we so much celebrate time. We're not just celebrating moments, we're actually celebrating our own lives as they are reflected in the flow of time. Which of course is a new take in general on looking at the calendar instead of beating the clock and meeting deadlines and seeing people feel time is working against us because we're all aging, time is actually one of our assets. You could say one of our vehicles with which we travel through life, and it teaches us things about ourselves if we're able to look at the energy of the time we're in. So what is the energy of today? So the day is the 15th of Av, which is the saddest month in the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar. Those of you here last week, we honored Tisha B'Av. Dimmer lights, lower stools, and we honored the destruction of the temple. And today, we honor the full moon of this dark month. As the Arizal, another great Kabbalist writes, he says, and his students wrote it down, that the reason the Talmud, the Mishnah says, there were no great holidays like the holiday of the 15th of Av, 1-5. Yep. Yes, I am. But I've been talking for the last half hour. Yeah. So, the Talmud, the Mishnah says that there were no holidays as great as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur, you can understand, is the holiest day of the year, the holy day of Yom Kippur. But what's the 15th of Av? So the Talmud goes on to explain different events that happened, special events that happened. But the Arizal explains it very poignantly in the mystical and spiritual terms. He says the moon, as the sun, are ways that we measure time. So just as time is energy, you can imagine the so-called luminaries, celestial bodies that help us distinguish between time. The sun rises, is a new day. When the moon appears, it's a new night. So the sun and moon regulate time. In Jewish thought, there's disagreements about whether the sun and moon regulate or measure time, or they actually create time. But suffice it to say, being that time is a form of energy, the sun and moon are connected to that flow of energy. And therefore, the understanding of the moon is very much also understanding ourselves, just as time reflects within our psyche, so does the sun and the moon. So the Rizal explains, of Isaac Luria, the great 16th century mystic, that on the 15th of Av, the full moon is unique because it follows, as he puts it, the destruction of the moon on the 9th of Av. In Kabbalistic terminology, the moon symbolizes Malchus, mentioned before, dignity. What is dignity? Dignity, to just give you a few synonyms so we identify with it, is essentially self-respect. True self-respect. Not false respect, what you get for people who want something from you, or for superficial reasons because you have something they want to benefit from. Self-respect is the inner respect, inner self-confidence, inner self-esteem that is the birthright of every human being. The Torah point of perspective, as the mere fact that you were born, you came to this earth, is a statement that no one can ever take away, that you are indispensable. Or as I like to put it, birth is God saying that you matter. You are indispensable, irreplaceable. That means that which you have to bring to this world is unique to you alone. No one that ever lived and no one that ever will live can replace you, period. This is the root of dignity. And every child from birth feels it and senses it. What happens sadly afterwards is that life itself beats it out of us. I'd rather rephrase that. It doesn't beat it out of us, it forces it into hiding. And often it begins with our own parents. May God bless them. that often our parents, in their own absenteeism, or own selfishness, or simple ignorance, and not appreciating the gift of life that was given to them to nurture and protect, meaning their children, or much worse, I don't want to even get into the abuse side of things, essentially undermine, compromise the natural dignity that every child will have on his or her own. And Malchus, using the words of the Kabbalists, goes undercover, gets concealed. And it's just a question of how deeply concealed it gets. How many layers, how many defense mechanisms we develop through life in order to compensate for the lack of dignity, or as some call it, shame that we carry due to our life's experiences. Now, each one of us has our own life story, so it's difficult to take one specific example because it plays itself out for each of us in a different way. But there's no question that all of us, our dignity in some way has been compromised, at least on the conscious level. So as we were born with that innocence as children, none of us have that innocence today. The question is, how far away are we from it? How far have we wandered from paradise, from Eden? And really, the search for happiness, as you see it presented in books and in poems and in songs, you'll always see it's that search for paradise. It's the search for innocence, the search for purity. You know, some call Citizen Kane the most best movie ever made. So there is a search for a rosebud. So everybody's got their rosebud. Everybody has their so-called pure moment. And when it some way re-emerges in your life at some point, whether it's when you fall in love, or just standing in awe, being in awe of nature, or in some other place where you are absolutely comfortable for that moment, you feel like a fish in water, you feel it's so natural to you. It doesn't need to be manufactured. And then you wonder, where does it disappear to again? You go back to life. So we all have those moments of truth. There's no one that does not have. And it can bring us to tears. And sometimes it's a song that elicits it, and sometimes it's a moment, sometimes, in most cases, it's spontaneous, it doesn't come planned. But when it comes, everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. What's really happening is that those moments, that purity, that malchus inside of you is being touched. And as it's touched, it comes alive. Obviously, the great gift would be if we could keep it alive and keep it blazing into our lives all the time. But what the mystics teach us is that as a pilot flame never is extinguished, this malchus is also never extinguished. Which is why in Jewish life, Jewish thought, the word hopeless does not exist. There is no such word as hopeless. Now we know there are hopeless situations. Doctors say that, others say that. But Jews never use the word hopeless. It's unacceptable because there's the belief, the absolute firm belief in the indomitable spirit that can never be destroyed. So yes, bodies can be destroyed, but a spirit can never be destroyed if you don't allow it to be. And this is really the reason the Jewish people are still here today. And it is the moon that captures this feature, perhaps more than any other physical object in the universe. So look at the moon. On one end, you can say the moon is really an insignificant entity. Well, one ball of light, one body, one celestial body among millions, trillions in the solar system. The sun, in its full glory, gives us warmth, light, source of life. The moon doesn't even have light on its own. It's not its own light. It's a reflection of the sun's light. So yes, it's in the gravitational orbit of the Earth. And it's the closest body that we go to, and therefore we're very mesmerized when man first landed on the moon, took the first steps. So it has a certain sensational element to it. And of course, for some people, the moon is about werewolves. Full moon brings out the werewolf in our culture. What is a werewolf? We'll discuss that another time, because now I'm focusing not on the werewolf. Maybe. So, you can say, therefore, that the moon doesn't seem to play a very significant role. The truth is, even in nature, scientifically speaking, the moon does play a significant role. Without the moon, there'd be no life on Earth. For instance, the tides are controlled by the moon and its gravitational pull. And the cycles of the moon affect the ocean currents. And the ocean currents affect weather. And if you would eliminate the moon's effect, this Earth would cease to be. There would be tsunamis and such radical movements in the weather that no life could function. There are also plants and other forms of life that thrive under the moonlight. There are plants actually that grow from moonlight or emerge in the moonlight. But that's all on a very so-called scientific level. On a spiritual level, however, the moon is actually considered to be much more symbolic of Malchus that I described than the sun. The sun is steady. It doesn't change. Yes, there are sunspots and sun flares, and the sun has its own fluctuations. But it does not have that type of power and change of the moon. The moon is the essence of change. So it's most reflective of the change in human beings. It never is the same way. It's always changing. There's the different cycles of the moon. The birth of the moon, the first quarter, the full moon, third quarter. And then above all, the moon wanes. And as it wanes, it disappears. And in its disappearance, you could think it may never re-emerge. And the Jewish people celebrate the new month, Rosh Chodesh, by honoring, by Kiddush Levana, by making a blessing on the moon. On the sun, we make a blessing once every 28 years. On the moon, every month. Not just a blessing standing outside and looking up at the sky and howling at the moon. It's connecting to the moon's connection to us and our personalities. That we too are ever-changing entities. We're constantly changing. Our moods change. We go through ups and downs on all levels. That's the nature of life. Life is mobile. And mobility means movement, and movement means change. And then we go through the ups and downs where at times things seem very difficult. And like the moon as it wanes, gets darker and darker. And we're taught, as we say in the prayer when we make the blessing on the moon, Shehei Masidin L'Schadish Kamoisa, that may we be renewed as the moon is renewed. Which means just at the moment of seemingly extinction, annihilation, disappearance, is a rebirth. And there's actually a story in the Tanakh. King David, when he was running for his life and escaping from Saul, King Saul, wanted to kill him. So there's a haftarah that we read whenever Rosh Chodesh is on a Sunday. So on Shabbos, before Rosh Chodesh, called Machar Chodesh, Erev Rosh Chodesh, the day before the new moon, we read this haftarah. And it begins with an expression. An expression goes like this. It's a very interesting expression. It says that on Rosh Chodesh, the king would always have a feast, a special new moon, new month feast. And everyone special in his life would come to this feast. His son Jonathan, Yohanan, who was very close friends with King David, they both would come to this feast. But at this point, David couldn't come because he was afraid for his life. So King David says to Yohanan, Genesis says actually to David, "V'nifkadata ki yipoked ma'shavecha." That when my father sees that your seat is empty, he's going to remember you. And in a very profound interpretation, the mystics and the Hasidic masters explain the twist, the ironic twist here, that he will remember you when you're not there. In other words, when you're there, he may take you for granted. Your absence is what will remind him that you exist. I mean, they've turned it into a cliche. What is it called? That absence is... there you go. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Right. But this is built on a concept, a Kabbalistic concept, that a vacuum can elicit more power than an area filled with energy. When the Rebbe had a heart attack and had to be bedridden, so he had these conversations with the doctor, and they're always about all kinds of interesting messages and lessons. And once when they took blood from him, the needle, so he asked the doctor, what is it that draws the blood? Is it the needle or is it the vacuum inside the needle? So he says the vacuum. The needle is just the conduit. And with that he explained the concept, that also from the Arizal, that when there's a vacuum has power, though you can't see it. Maybe a good example of it that in our contemporary physics, the black hole. So today we know that a black hole is much more powerful than a bright star. It's so powerful that it doesn't let any light escape. So which is more powerful? Something you see or something that you don't see? Or to put it in other terms, what's more powerful, words or silence? This too is a question in the Zohar. The Levites would serve God in the temple by singing song, composing melodies, composing songs. The Kohanim, the priests, would serve in silence, b'chashay. So the question is asked, which is greater, silence or sound? So initially, the knee-jerk reaction is sound is always greater than silence. It's louder. And the answer is no, silence is always greater than sound. You learn more from the silence of a wise person than from his words. Siyag l'chochma shtika. Because what takes more energy for an intelligent person? To speak or to not speak? Because when someone has something to say, there's some people, it takes a lot of energy not to speak for other reasons. But for some, if they have something to say, the wisdom and the restraint that's exercised takes a lot of energy because they have something important to say. So withholding sometimes is more powerful than giving. So let's take an example in our own lives, love. Well, I once said that and someone said, well, that's not exactly what's going on in my life. So it's not really, hopefully, it's something that's going on in our lives, love. So in love, there's two dimensions, at least. One is the process of giving. Love is equated with giving. You love someone, you're in a giving mode, you give. And not based on any conditions necessarily or ulterior motives. It's a giving mode. Obviously, when people are insecure and their dignity has been wounded, which we'll soon discuss, giving is not that easy. But in the healthy form of it, love is giving, nurturing. And you're not afraid to give, and it's not based on how much you get in return. However, there's another side to it. How much and how fast you give. For instance, there are people who have hurt others in the name of love. By giving too much, by overwhelming someone else with your love, by overwhelming them with your presence, and not allowing them space, and not containing them, so to speak. And the example given for it is rain. Rain is also a form of giving. Bestowing chesed, rain. It rains on the fields and waters the fields and allows things to grow. So the Talmud says about famine in Israel, and this great sage went and prayed for rain. And the rain began to come down, but it came down in buckets. And instead of watering the fields, it was flooding the fields. So it says he went to pray again and say, Reif Teva, Ein Yechel Lekabel. There's greatness, there's abundance of good we cannot receive, we're not contained. And the second prayer was that the rain should come down in drops. So raindrops are a perfect example of a healthy transmission of love. It comes down and it's transmitted. It's not a famine. But it comes down in raindrops, each drop measured for the earth to be able to absorb it. And once it's absorbed, the next drop comes down. and then things grow. Take that same rain and get rid of the drops. It comes down and drenches, floods the fields. It'll not only won't make things grow, it'll destroy the fields. And the same is when we give love. It's not just how much you want to give, or how much you can give. It's also how much the person you're giving can contain. And that's also part of the love, the sensitivity. Not just about you, me, giving. I want to give, I want to love. It's also understanding who you're giving to, and is it in a way that they can contain it? Can they relate to it? Can they understand it? That's what love is. These two, chesed and gvura, the way it would be put into the Hasidic and Kabbalistic terminology. So, with that in mind, just the transmission of light is very powerful, but sometimes withholding is more powerful than giving. Silence, the vacuum. And that's what King David and Jonathan were talking about, that he will remember you in your absence. And sadly, in our own lives, sometimes the wake-up call comes not when we are spoiled and getting everything we want and need, it's when we feel a lack. When do people call out and cry out? When do people reach? When they feel they're lacking something. When you think you have it all, you take it for granted. And when you're filled with yourself, there's no room for anything else. Arrogance is always a very easy byproduct of abundance, prosperity. Not to suggest that prosperity is not a blessing, but if it doesn't come with humility, it always creates a certain distortion. So the vacuum has its own power. As the moon has its power, and that's why we say that of Torah, as it disappears. Because it's in its disappearance, it gives the ability for rebirth and renewal. So no one of us should necessarily have to go through true deprivation. But the fact is, sometimes when something's taken away from you, your attitude can be, okay, I've lost something. Or the attitude can be that a block has been taken away for something greater to come my way. And this isn't just about a cute way of psyching us up. It's actually the process of life. You show me an area of growth that is not preceded by some frustration. There is no such thing as growth without a vacuum that precedes it. Creativity is a child of frustration. You want to write something, you want to create something, you will always see that you gather information or you research, and then you come to a point of total confusion, to the point you don't know if you're ever going to get out of this trap place, and then it emerges. A woman goes through birth pains to give birth to a new child. A seed has to deteriorate in the ground for it to turn into a new plant. Everywhere you turn where there's growth, there's always a vacuum that precedes it. The problem is that we're inside the vacuum, we don't see outside of it. And we think that's all there is. We don't see before and we don't see after. Does a caterpillar in the cocoon know that it will turn into a butterfly? We don't really know. We haven't interviewed the caterpillar. But if we can use ourselves as an example, when we are in a vacuum, we feel only darkness. You do not feel growth. When someone gets fired from a job, they don't see it as a blessing. Even though it may turn into a blessing. And you know something? It will always turn to a blessing if you allow it to, and it's your attitude. Trust me, I've been around, I've counseled enough people to tell you that in 99% of the instances that I've seen, even negative experiences that were completely negative at the outset were actually great opportunities. And the real negative part was the attitude of the person who could not see that it's an opportunity. So I will tell you that 90% of the problem is not what happens to you, it's what you do with it. And if you don't fully integrate and assimilate the concept that growth comes after a vacuum, the vacuum is not what will destroy you. It's the attitude that you feel it's over. The demoralization that comes as a result of it. And it's like most problems. The problem itself can be contained, but our attitude often takes control and then it gets out of control. It's like, God forbid, someone may be in a hospital sick. What really ultimately destroys them? It's not the illness itself, in most cases. It's a demoralization. They have no family. Obviously, they sit and think all day about how alone they are. Nobody comes to visit. There's no optimism. There's no hope. That hopelessness is far, far more profound impact on our physiology than the actual illness. I'm not minimizing. Some illnesses, God forbid, are serious illnesses. I'm not suggesting that every illness can just be willed away. But attitude is a major part of it, and doctors are just beginning to understand it. And it's not just with the illness, it's in every situation. You know, you could take even sports, artists. If you get into a funk and in a bad mood, that'll destroy your ability to truly create, to perform. Makes no difference what happened yesterday, how talented you may be. If psychologically you don't feel strong, you can't do it. There was a custom in the olden days, some armies, they go out to march to war. Before their first battle, they would sing a song of victory, a march of victory. Why they sing a march of victory before they even began? Because it is actually has enough impact on you that if you don't feel you can win, you're not going to fight the same way. One of the lessons from Vietnam was not just the war itself, was that the people lost hope and faith that they could ever win this battle. Can you fight a battle that you don't even believe you can win? There has to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And not as the cynics say, that I discovered after half my life that the light at the end of the tunnel is an oncoming train. I'm talking about a true light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way out of here. A way out of this place, as they say. And this comes from not just faith, it comes from a profound conditioning that you develop. Often it's the people in our early formative years that give us this type of hope. When you see you've been around parents or adults that you respected, that you saw, never gave up, always had that confidence. It's always touching to see, you see a mother who all the doctors wrote off her child as being autistic, you'll never communicate with this child. And you see a mother absolutely, you could say even irrationally, does not give up hope on her child, and she connects. And years later, no one can understand what happened. It's understanding the unfathomable power of the Spirit, and that there are mysteries that we do not know. And to have that arrogance and say, I have it all figured out, that it's hopeless, is actually extremely arrogant, because who are you to say it's hopeless? What do you know about life? How much do you know about yourself or others to just be able to write a death sentence, that it's over? There's a doctor I know, a friend of his, and I remember once seeing him, and he shared with me the following story. Now, he was younger and more brash and more filled with himself. So he had an older chassid came to see him, and who was diagnosed with, as they say, menachem-av, with cancer, terminal illness. And the doctor, in his own, I guess, what he thought was compassionate, says to him, listen, Usher was his name. It's Friday. Go home. I can do nothing more for you. Doctors can do nothing more for you. Go home and prepare to meet your Creator. Now, Rabbi Usher was a person who went through prisons in the Soviet Union. And he had bigger odds than this doctor's death sentence. So he wrote a little note on Friday to the Rebbe, saying that this is what the doctor said to him. And he's asking for a blessing. Anyway, that Shabbos, the Rebbe spoke. And I didn't know that it was about this till this doctor told me about it. And the Rebbe spoke, it was seemingly couched in the language of halacha, Jewish law. There's the law of treif. Treif is the opposite of kosher, called hilchos treifus. So what does the word treif mean? It means essentially terminal illness. That if an animal has a wound or a handicap that will cause it to die at some point, that renders that animal non-kosher. So the Rebbe asked the question, so how do we determine whether something is terminal or not? So he says, no human being can determine that. And he made this statement, he said, the Torah asked the question, who gave the right for doctors to heal? You know, God gave us life. God gave us the ability to heal as well. Doctors don't give us that power. So who gave the power for us to go to doctors? So the Torah says, you shall heal him. And the Talmud learns from that, derives from that mikan, from here we learn that God gave the power of healing to human beings. Mekan nitlan reshus. He gave permission to human beings to heal each other. So it's a gift to heal. So a doctor doesn't heal us. It's the body that has a power, a regenerative power of healing. What a doctor knows how to do is understanding that power, how to be a catalyst, how to wake it up, some way intervene. But that's it. The Torah only says that the power and the permission was given to a doctor to heal. The Rebbe continued, but not for a doctor to kill. No one ever gave permission to a doctor to say someone is going to die for sure. You can say, I will do everything I can to help heal you. After that, I don't know. As I said, when the Rebbe spoke this, no one really knew what he was saying, why he was discussing it. After Shabbos, the secretary of the Rebbe calls up the doctor and says, the Rebbe asked me to share with you the words that he spoke on Shabbos. So this doctor told me, you can imagine, he says, I stopped my practice for months after that. I could not practice. It was such a lesson in my own, what's called bedside manner. The arrogance that I thought I have the power to tell somebody you're going to die. No human being has that power. So we all know doctors. Many of them are very arrogant. I've met some of them. My father, before he passed away, had to deal with doctors. And I remember the doctor who told my mother, when she said she wants to go for a second opinion, so this is what he answered. He said to her, I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. And of course my mother immediately understood she better go get one fast before waiting for him. And then there's a few doctors you meet that are truly humble. That will tell you with their expertise, and I know a few really top experts. I know one particular doctor, he's not Jewish, Dr. Griffo. He's the head of fertility in NYU. And he'll be the first to tell you that we know very little about fertility. Now you think the head of fertility should be advocating how much we know and how much we could heal you and how much money we can make, and all that. So fertility is one of the biggest mysteries. That's what he'll say. It's a divine thing. And it's not because he's particularly religious. He says, I have seen situations where a woman and a man had everything working technically and medically, and they couldn't have a child. And other situations where no way medically they could have, and she conceives. What I can do is, knowing from the developments in medicine and technologies, we can try our best and test and so on. And he's not saying it just to protect himself from malpractice. He's truly a humble person. I've met him. I've spoken to him. I asked him things. There are doctors who understand that the gift of life and the gift of healing comes from a greater place. And that doesn't diminish their experience or what they can do. As a matter of fact, I would say it adds to it. You want a doctor who has both sides, has true experience and true knowledge, but also has true humility, because he'll make less mistakes, frankly. Simply put. So there's a mystery to life, and the way we access that mystery is through saying that we don't know. But that takes a lot of confidence. So to go back to the moon, as I was saying, silence is sometimes more powerful than words. And if you want an example for it, look in your own heart and soul. Look in your own life. I know we're taught today, especially in this age, speak up for yourself. Because nobody knows what you're thinking or what you want in communication, and how many relationships fall apart because people didn't say what they want and what their needs are, etc., etc. So there's a big celebration of communication, as if that makes people able to communicate. It's another story. But I'll share with you another secret about communication that works the other way around, actually. That most of us, even if we want to, we don't know how to communicate. Because we don't know how to speak about, and we're unable to speak about, the most intimate parts of our being. Not due to our deficiency, due to the fundamental inability to communicate certain things. I'll use an example. This is all examples really fit under this umbrella. When it comes to talking about superficial things, like what? Let's say, like the weather, or sports, or some other life-shattering experiences like that, you can talk endlessly about it. Go to offices, turn on the radio, commentary upon commentary, in the season, out of the season, about everything. And then when you're asked to talk about yourself, How many words will you come up with? So what does your intimate self look like, feel like? You won't find many words. And not because you're ashamed and you don't want to share with others, because even with people we trust, there isn't much to say. What are you going to say about your most innermost self? What do you really like in the deepest part of you? We can talk about what we like to do. If people are asked, who are you? Today, knee-jerk response, they give you a business card. That's not who you are, that's what you do. Talk about your innermost self. The older we get, we realize there's almost nothing to say. What are you supposed to say? So it seems odd. And when it comes to talk about things that have nothing to do really with you in a real way, you can talk about it forever. Talks about yourself, you don't have more than a sentence or a few to say. Why is that the case? The answer is because talking about superficial things doesn't take much. You don't need that many containers. So words are suffice. When it comes to the intensity of human feelings, plain words are just not enough. So we create what's called the language of metaphor. Poetry, a song, music, art. Captures certain feelings that plain words cannot capture. Because it broadens the container, the metaphor. And sometimes that's also not sufficient. So we go further, deeper into yourself. Sometimes it's just a cry. A person cries out. A laugh. Or even oy vey. Can capture more than volumes. And then there is an intensity that is so profound that even a sound is too much. When people experience deep trauma, for instance, they can't even cry. It's so intense, and the shock is so deep, there's nothing that comes out of their mouths. So the interesting paradox is that the deeper and more intimate the experience, the less words there are for it, the less sounds. Because sounds are outer containers that can only contain that much. Think of it like a cup. It can only contain what fits into the cup. Something more intense simply cannot be expressed through this container. This doesn't mean we can't express the innermost sense of self, but if you think you're going to use conventional language, it will always be inadequate. That's why people who love each other, through a hug, through a kiss, even through a look, they can capture more than all the words in the world. Because it's an intensity that words simply cannot express. So this is the paradox of life. And this is the mystery of the moon. That the more it diminishes, the more powerful it becomes. The sun does not have this secret. The sun is intense and very intense. But that's it. The moon has the power to disappear and yet be reborn. It's only the things that are invisible that can have the ultimate power of eternity. There's an expression used in Hasidic terminology. The word is used, bittul. I've shared this word many times here. Bittul is literally hard to describe. It means a combination of modesty, humility, but really a suspension of self. So the expression that I remember when I heard it for the first time, it blew me away. Goes like this: Bittul kenish bottle werden. The only thing that can disappear is, you know what? Is disappearance. Anything that exists can cease to exist. But something whose existence is based on not being, the more it isn't, the more it is. Follow? Now this isn't just some type of nice Zen koan. It actually means that we are only as great as we are. But when you're committed to something greater than yourself, you become an extension of that. And if you commit to something that's eternal, even a mortal human being can be an extension of immortality. It comes down to that greatness is achieved through becoming less, not through becoming more. It's counter, actually, to everything that we're taught, if you want to put it bluntly. Because we're taught, you want to be somebody, go out and get it. And the more you grab, the more you're going to get. It's true on one level, but only on the outer level. There's another level of being that the less you have, the more you have. That doesn't mean that you have to shed and get rid of everything that you have in your life. It means that the more it's driven by your self-interest, the less you're ultimately going to own. Anything real in life, and I talk about real, love, happiness, inner peace. One after the other is all built on not trying to achieve it. Those people who are trying to find happiness will never find happiness. Look at every happy person. It's a person who found it by not looking for it. Doesn't mean they didn't want it, but it wasn't some type of aggressive thing. Okay, I'm going to go now to a store called happiness, and I'm going to buy a jar, or I'm going to travel somewhere. Those are good distractions, and I'm not saying that we can't find certain peace or certain beauty in different places we travel to. But remember, happiness is not something that is in a particular location. Either you're happy or you're not happy. Yes, obviously, you get away from a hostile environment, the pressure of work, have a little vacation. It can bring out the happiness within you, a calm and so on. But happiness is completely an attitude within, and those that are happy actually are happy even in hostile environments. Because environments don't affect them. Because they're not shaped and they're not a product of their environment. It's something that comes from within. This is a bittul that takes a lifetime to develop. And it's something we're all, it's a process. No one masters it. But it's an approach to life. What do you think really is the secret of love? You'll find all kinds of books with techniques, from sexual techniques to behavioral techniques to emotional techniques. And I'm not even saying that all of them don't work, but these are techniques. Techniques, that's not what love is. Love is a noun, not a verb. Love is a state of being that emerges when your whole attitude is one where giving is more important than taking. That's what it comes down to. We live in a world where we're taught needs. My needs are not being met. A relationship that begins and ends with needs is absolutely doomed. That doesn't mean people won't stay together for convenience purposes, but it will not be the love you're looking for. Love is mastered by those that are ready to surrender and give up the needs. That doesn't mean your needs won't be met. As a matter of fact, your needs will be met even in a deeper way that way, but it's not driven by needs. Because then it becomes a convenient contract, like a business contract. You give me what I need, I give you what you need, and then we'll love each other. No one says it quite that way because it doesn't sound so romantic. And it wouldn't work if you said it that way. But that's what it comes down to. Cut away all the so-called coatings, sugar coating. That's what it is, because we've been trained this way. We've been trained that people want things from us. People will use us. There are predators out there. We've been hurt. I want something. You want something. Especially if you've been hurt, you don't want to be hurt again. So I know one person who used to tell me, I've mastered it all. I've even mastered. I can absolutely fake being vulnerable all the way, and the guy will never know. And I looked at her and I said, "So Achmanas on you, I mean, someone that's confided in me." I said, "Even vulnerability you've mastered, huh?" Which is, of course, this a contradiction of terms. But this is going back to the message of tonight, of today, dignity. When we've been hurt and wounded, and we all have been in one way or another, this is what we do. We develop techniques, and we develop methods to survive, to maneuver, to navigate. There's someone here that does not have developed such techniques? You wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't, by the way. Not to say that this room is only for dysfunctional people, including myself, but I think this whole world is a wounded world in one way or another. And I'm not saying that to be negative. On the contrary, it's just recognition that we live in a world where our parents, whether for good intentions or not, thought that the best thing for us as children is for them to be materially successful. So they both worked. And well, for what? For the children. And then when you ask them, so are you there for the children? Yeah, we're putting away a lot of money. And when all the child really wants is his mother or father to come home and say, I know you exist. So in the name of for our children, we ended up hurting our children. I see this all over. And this is even in the most so-called healthy homes. I'm not even talking about real dysfunctionality that takes on the shape of horrendous, or even not such horrendous, abuse and so on and so forth. So we live in a very, very hurt world. And, Jews always saw the litmus test of a society. You know what the litmus test of a society is? So ask people today, what do you think is the sign of a criteria for a healthy society? So some people say a humming economy, good politicians. The list goes on. Well, the humble Jews will say the following. The litmus test for a healthy society is the children. What is the welfare of our children? And look at our children. And I've seen too many, so I know. There aren't many very healthy children. And not because of them, because of the environments they grow up in. And if you think about it, it's like a minefield. Besides our homes, let's say you even get through that minefield of a home that gave you some nurturing. Then you're in school. And we are all thrown into sexuality long before we're ready for it. The cards are stacked against us, frankly. By the time we are ready to have a true mature relationship, we've already had so many immature ones. And we've been wounded. There's no way around that. And I'm not talking here, I'm not trying to suggest any type of religious prudishness. It's just that we live in a world where we, as children growing into adults, are thrown to the wolves. Nobody really knows how to give us direction. If you're lucky, you grow up in a home that has some values, so there's something that will give you some type of compass. But the truth is, you've all been there as teenagers, young teenagers. What do we know then? And who told us anything? As a matter of fact, we don't even trust adults at that point. So who gives direction? Who nurtures the soul as it's beginning to mature into an adult? And then throw into the picture, what is it, the average of 5 hours a day that a child watches television? Is that the average? Something like that. It's like more hours watching television than going to school. Now again, I'm not about the television, it's not the technology, but what is shaping this child's life? I remember visiting someone at the hospital, I was in the waiting room. So they had the TV on, and a bunch of kids were sitting there with the mother, and the nurse, the attendant nurse there at the station. And this television station is on, I don't know, I rarely, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, some type of expose show, like, girlfriend's dog rapes, something, like absolute, not even titillating, ridiculous, beyond, not even sensational. And they're all glued to the TV watching this. And I was like, shocked by the kids all watching it. It was just, it took me. So I go over to the nurse. I say, you think it's so good for kids to watching this? And so she got angry at me. Like, how am I stopping her from watching her soap opera? But then I kept sitting there, so she felt guilty, so she finally changed the channel. I'm sure I destroyed her life right there. She what the end of the show would be. And I said to myself, leaving, so this is not one moment. This is a steady diet, day after day, week after week, month after month. How could these people have a fighting chance? And yet you see people do. So the only answer is that the spirit is so powerfully alive that despite all these odds, it still finds its way in and still has some impact on us. Well, this is, in blatant terms, what Malchus, our inner soul and its dignity, is enduring through our lifetimes. Again, I don't know each one of your scripts. Everyone has their own story. But you can extrapolate from what I've said, I'm sure, examples of it in your own life. And I also grew up in America. I know this world as well. And our Malchus, our soul, our inner dignity, is under constant assault. Do not kid yourself. Constant. Assault doesn't always mean intentional. It can be subliminal. It can be from advertising. It can be from everybody trying to hawk something or other, selling us something. Are there good messages out there too? Yes, but they're far and few and far and what do they say? Far and there you go. Few and far between. Right. I knew there was a smooth way of saying it. And to sift through it all is not such an easy process. And Google doesn't help much. Like if you type in Google tonight, try it out. Give me only healthy information. What do you think is going to happen? So there's guys, I'm sure, doing that. They say, selling you healthy information. So we're swamped and we're inundated. But the good news is, and that's why we're sitting here, that this month, the day of the month, teaches us that there's the full moon within each of us. That even though the moon goes through and is constantly being bombarded by the so-called proverbial asteroids of the marketing world, we also have a certain soul and dignity of Malchus intact. And when it comes full on this month of Av, after it was destroyed just a few days ago on the 9th of Av, it's a demonstration and a celebration of the highest holiday of all, that nothing can destroy us. So on one hand, we have to be very honest and sober about what we're exposed to, but the other side of the coin, which is the most important, is that you're nobody's victim if you don't want to be. That's the message. All that I painted till now may sound very depressing, but there's the second half, which I hope is more important for you to hear, which is we don't have to be victim to all of this. Despite our childhoods, and despite what has happened long before we had choices, your pilot flame of Malchus is still alive and still burning, and from time to time will rear its head. But the most important thing is you can control its emergence in your life. And you control it by recognizing, number one, that it's there. So on this day, the first thing we declare is that Malchus is there. It's full. The same moon you see now tonight outside is the same moon that Moses looked at thousands of years ago. And is the same moon that people who suffered took solace in and hope when they saw the moon become full again. And we can take solace that moon is a reflection of our own indomitable Malchus spirit that can always be reborn again. The question is now how to do it. Is number one, as I said, that complete belief in yourself. Being around other people who help you believe in yourself. Which is of course the opposite of being around people who help contribute and reinforce negative self-image. And then come the actions that we do. Actions. Just like any exercise, if you don't do it daily, it does not manifest in your life. We have to have constant, let's call it Malchus exercises. Exercises that strengthen that inner part of you. Especially if it's gone undercover for long, and especially if you've had experiences in life that reinforce the reason for you not to let it emerge, all kinds of experiences that may have broken, hurt you, disappointed you, and so on, then you need it even more, the exercises to allow it to emerge. So the first one that I would suggest, that I always suggest, is in the morning when you wake up, to say the Modani. It's a one-line prayer that basically says, Modani lefanecha melech Malchus. You acknowledge, thank you for giving me back my soul, that indispensable soul that only I have. Simply recognizing and acknowledging every day that this is a real part of you. That's a critical component, because if you don't do that, what is a real part of you every day is not exactly building your strength, your inner strength. So you need to counter it. For every negative thought, you have to have a few positive ones. Statistics, they say, are that the person loses $1,000, they feel much worse than the happiness of winning $1,000. In other words, they don't cancel each other out. You have to win $3,000 to cancel out the pain of losing $1,000. Basically, 3 positives for every negative. Why that's that way, we can discuss another time. So, for all the negatives in our days, we have to find positives. And positives, as I said, first take on the shape of acknowledging that you have that strength. A second way of reinforcing Malchus is like the moon. Look at the moon and you have lesson number 2. Lesson number 2 is that by giving, you receive more than by taking. The moon does not have its own light. It receives. It's reflecting the sunlight. But what it gives as a result is more powerful than the sun. So the idea of giving as being seen as diminishing you is a myth. It's false. The people who are the most confident people are the people who are the biggest givers. People who hoard and don't give, it's always due to lack of confidence. They think by giving away, they become less. A flame, for instance, lights another flame. The first flame does not get diminished. Knowledge is a comparison to flame. Love is the same. Do you have less love when you give love? What becomes less when you give it? Only material things, because material things are measured in quantity. So if you have a certain amount of food you give away, you have less food. A certain amount of money, you have less money. Love, light, warmth, nurturing, knowledge. Basically all the real commodities that are everlasting, the more you give, the more you have actually. Because when one flame lights another flame, not only does the first flame not get diminished, two of them are stronger for it. And the same thing is with knowledge, and the same thing is with love. But we've been trained, because we've been trained by insecure people in an insecure world, to be insecure, and the only solution to insecurity is what they call securities, is more money. And it doesn't work that way. You don't get security from things that are temporary. So the logic understands it, but the heart doesn't believe it. Can something temporary give you permanent security? But still people pursue the temporary. This doesn't mean that there isn't a blessing in prosperity and in wealth, and everyone should be blessed with it. But never worship it as an end in itself. As I often share the story with that Rebbe who was arrested by the Soviets, and they were particularly cruel to him. And one of them pointed a pistol to his head and said, "Rebbe, if you don't cooperate, this pistol here has made many people cooperate." That's what they said to him. And he responded with following words without flinching. He said, "This little toy," referring to the revolver, "this little toy can frighten someone that has one world and many gods, but not someone who has one God and many worlds." And he actually prevailed over them. What is that meaning of that? Think about it. One world and many gods, or one God and many worlds. Now, not he wanted to die. He was basically saying, you can take away one world from me, you can never take away my other world. It's called diversification. You invest it all in one basket, that basket's taken away, it's over. That's why death frightens so many people. That's why poverty frightens so many people. But a person who knows that the power lies not in this material acquisition is not frightened by it. The third lesson from the moon is that disappearance is actually the greatest blessing. Invisibility does not mean weakness. It means ultimate strength. It's so powerful it cannot be seen. Like the black hole. Like the silence I described earlier. The silence of wisdom is much more powerful than all the words ever expressed. So the disappearance of the moon is actually what makes it stronger. The sun were to disappear, it would probably never reappear. The moon has no problem. It's confident enough to say, I won't get credit for tonight, but tomorrow I will be reborn and I don't disappear. It's only those that are not afraid of disappearing that actually live forever, basically. And you see this time and again through history, that it's not people who build great monuments to themselves. Where are the great-grandchildren, let me ask you, of Julius Caesar? Or even of Aristotle? These were great giants. Empires. Money. Armies. Greater than we'll ever imagine. Where are their children, grandchildren? You don't even have people claiming that they're grandchildren. These for celebrity purposes. Once in a while we have an appearance of someone saying they're a child of the last Tsar and Tsaress of Russia, Nicholas and Alexandria. Whether they're real or not is another story. And here we are, Jewish people, compared to the moon, count by the moon, and we can say, not only do we know who our great-grandparents were, who lived 4,000 years ago, but we even know where they walked. We know where they're buried. And they're still fighting over the same burial spot over these thousands of years. That's unbelievable eternity. Imagine, will you be remembered in 4,000 years from now? Do you know anyone that will be? Here are people we talk about, Abraham and Sarah. We know what they did, what they walked, and not only we talk about it, we learn from them, we're inspired by them, as if they were just around. Where does such power come from? The power came because even when they were alive, what they were driven by were invisible forces they disappeared, but in their disappearance they are forever. As I said before, the only thing that remains forever is the thing that is able to disappear. Because it's not driven, it's not fed by its appearances or by its manifestation, it's fed by its lack of manifestation. Bittul cannot become batul. Something that's invisible cannot become invisible. Only visible things, only things that have a personality, an ego, can be destroyed. That's why it says that tzaddikim, even in their deaths, they're alive, and wicked people, even in their lifetimes, they are dead. I remember once asked to speak at a yahrzeit, I think, or shloshim, passing after honoring the passing of someone. It was in the Upper West Side, and I was being driven a car on the West Side Highway, and I didn't really know what I was going to say at that point. And then it came to me in the form of a billboard, smack on the West Side Highway. And interesting billboard. No, it was not for spiritual life. It was a billboard advertising Newport cigarettes. Anybody smokes Newport here? Anybody works for Newport? I want to make sure I don't insult anybody. So you had these two faces. They still use the same ad. Two beautiful young people, man and woman, with these gleaming, envious faces. I mean, we envy them, not they are envious. And the whitest teeth that you've ever seen in your life. No way they were real. And it said Newport. It said, alive with pleasure. And then Newport. And then in the bottom, of course, the big prerequisite box that smoking kills and destroys, and the whole thing, which is interesting, and had to be large enough to be able to be seen. Which in itself is a study in human nature, how people buy. While I was telling you, it kills you, but that ad is more powerful than the killing. So I don't really know, but I guess it influences us all. And I was thinking to myself, there we go. I have my speech ready. So this is what society tells us. That these two young people are alive, and not just alive with pleasure. Now, you have a picture of their white teeth and their beautiful eyes and suntan faces. And I was wondering, but they didn't show a picture of what their teeth really look like if they smoked Newport for too long. And definitely not an x-ray of their lungs, but images, appearances. We say the great cliche, don't judge a book by its cover. Do you know anyone that doesn't? And it's alive with pleasure. And it happened to be that week was Parsha Chayei Sarah, which is the chapter in the Torah that's called the life of Sarah. So I had my contrast. You look in the chapter Life of Sarah, you know what it talks about? Her death. From verse 1, it talks about Vayihi Shnei Chayei Sarah. These are the years of Sarah, 127 years. She died. And then continues Abraham's search for a burial plot. Bought one, buried her there. Elaborates on the burial, and then on the search for a bride for Isaac after his mother died. There's not one verse in this chapter that talks about her life. It's all about her death and post-death. You want her life? It's the early chapter preceding it. Yet the Torah calls this the life of Sarah. So I was thinking, the life of Sarah, here's alive with pleasure. And I realized that's the answer. You want to know when someone's really alive from the Torah point of view? You don't look at their false, touched-up photographs. You don't even look at their real photographs. You look at how they are remembered the day after they're gone. There are big maguls today and big, powerful people that people honor and worship and admire, or at least fake it, and give them honors and plaques. But the day they're gone, many people breathe a sigh of relief. And I don't know how long they're remembered for. So are they really alive? What does it mean to be alive? Doctors will say, biologically, you're breathing, your heart is bumping. That's alive. The Torah says, you want to know what life is? Look at Sarah. Look at how her husband treated her. Not when she was around. When she was no longer physically around. When she disappeared, that's when you see how powerful her real life was. Because she was no longer there to serve their needs. And yet Abraham honors her and finds her a Ma'aras HaMachpelah, which is the Hebron, the burial plot that we know of today in Israel. That's the place where she's buried. And later Abraham is buried there, and later the other patriarchs and matriarchs. And see how he goes, looks for a bride that's similar to his wife. And Isaac chooses a wife that is very similar to his mother. It's not a Freudian thing. This happens to be a mother that was worthy to be similar to. That's, she's alive. She's impacting lives, even though she physically is no longer walking on this earth. And we can sit here today and talk about inspiration, real inspiration, of what it means to be a woman by learning from Sarah, what it means to be a man by learning from Abraham. These are not abstract concepts. These are living concepts. And yet, Newport is telling us, alive with pleasure are these two. That's a contrast. But we are distracted and we are seduced by the sensory stimulation of the visual world, of the audio world, of the whole externals. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It has an element to it, that's true. But what's lacking, and the most important and powerful thing of all, is appreciating what is reality. So the moon teaches us the final lesson, that disappearance, do not be deceived by disappearance. Something that is not there visibly does not mean it's not there. It could be there more powerfully than things that are very visible. Not everything that looks powerful is powerful, and not everything that doesn't look like anything is not powerful. The most powerful forces in life are invisible. And today we know this on many levels, scientific as well. The subcellular structure, DNA, subatomic particles, all invisible forces. But they're the ones that shape everything. One mutation, God forbid, one shift in that dimension, and everything goes, it wreaks unbelievable havoc. So the final lesson of the moon is appreciating what is real, what is not real. How do we apply that to our life? It's applicable in the context of bittul. What is bittul? Bittul means how we deal with our daily lives. Is it all about you or not? If it's all about you, then sadly, that is quite limited. But if you dedicate something to another, if you dedicate a part of your life to service, helping another, whether it's volunteering, whether it's charity, anything that you give instead of taking is not making you less, it makes you more. So yes, there's an element of invisibility there because it's not driven by me, but it's driven by a deeper force that does not die quickly because it's not born, something that is eternal. And all of us have the ability to implement that in our lives. So if we take these lessons and daily commit to them, not just theoretically, daily, that is the moda'ani I mentioned, whether it's reinforcing it with good people around us and not the opposite, whether it's the lessons I mentioned about giving as opposed to taking, and finally that disappearance and bittul is more powerful than presence. These are the ways we reinforce the malchus within us. And that's what gives a person true self-confidence. It's because it's coming from a place that is profound and intimate in our own souls. And it's not and we don't buy into that which has been brainwashed and programmed into our minds of what we think is called acquisition, what we think is power. That's the lessons of the 15th of Av, the full moon of Av. So, I want to wish everyone, since we all have a moon within us, so the moon goes through its cycles, its stages, and there will be times when it's less complete, more complete, that today, tonight, the moon is at its fullest. But it's not just once a month, this is once a year, as the Arizal says, because it's coming in the month of Av, in the sad month that follows the destruction. That even after everything that was destroyed and taken on Tisha B'Av, the moon yet rises yet again in a full way. And this is a prelude to the next month of Elul. It's called the month of compassion, that begins rebuilding the relationship, which prepares us into the year of the new year, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Those of you familiar with my book, 60 Days, you'll see that the whole story of the high holidays really begins in this month. The sadness and in a sense, the disappearance that we have in this month of ours now is the one that gives birth to the greatest holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So if you look into the book, you'll see more of it. We'll be discussing it in the coming weeks. My conclusion is in the form of a blessing that we should all have the strength to hold on to this moon of ours and give each other strength. And please see me, Meaning for Life Center, our team, our staff here, as allies in this battle, if you wish. And sometimes the things that are most invisible are the things that are the most powerful foundations in our lives. So thank you. And a few announcements I shall make. Number one is that tomorrow night Philip resumes. No? Okay. Tomorrow night Philip does not resume his class. That's the announcement. Thank you. On August 17th, when is that? Oh, that's 2 weeks. Okay, so you have these flyers about this film from Maya Bataj that is being shown here. It's lying out there if you want to have details about it. And I want to dedicate the class to a father of my good friend Fivish Hill Pevsner, who was nifter on the 14th of Tammuz. We just honored his shloshim. And also dedicated by Iris Kloin in honor of her mother's Rose's Yahrzeit, which is today. If anybody wants to dedicate a class or a program or a webcast or an email in honor of anybody special, it's always a great thing to link a special day to the eternity of Torah study or inspiring, spiritually touching each other. And on that note, we will be back next Wednesday. If anybody needs any assistance in any fashion or form, please contact me or my office. And I should also announce that I will be doing the high holidays at this place here, at the synagogue here. So if you want to know more information, contact us as well. And celebrate the full moon, not with werewolves, but with angels, in the fullest way possible. Everyone have a very pleasant night, a good week. It's an honor to speak to you. Thank you.